Tonight on Greater Boston, I'm Sue O'Connell in for Jim Browdy. After neo-Nazis demonstrated outside Brigham and Women's Hospital against two doctors working on racial health equity, GBH News investigative reporter Phillip Martin started digging into the history. He joins me with that. Then later, CNN President Jeff Zucker is out for failing to disclose a consensual relationship with a colleague, a move that raises a lot of questions about both the past and future of the network. The rise of right-wing extremism in the United States has been on experts' radars for years. And look, Massachusetts is no exception. As we saw the weekend before last, around 24 members of the Worcester-born neo-Nazi group stood outside Brigham and Women's Hospital with a large banner claiming the hospital, quote, kills whites. And they passed out flyers with the names and photos of two doctors working on health equity for communities of color, claiming they're pushing, quote, anti-white genocidal medical treatment policies. Unfortunately, it's just the latest instance of threats leveled against doctors Michelle Morris and Brigham Wispelwey and Brigham and Women's at large. They started last spring after the pair published an article in Boston Review titled An Anti-Racist Agenda for Medicine. GBH News investigative journalist Phillip Martin has reported extensively on this story, and he joins me now. Phillip, first, great to see you in person.
Sue, it's a pleasure seeing you in person.
Let's talk about this. This is shocking on a number of levels, except it's not new. But first, tell me what these two doctors have been working on, what their agenda is, what their public health view is.
Well, they both come from, they're internists and public health physicians, and they come from a position of community and looking at exclusion. And one of the areas of exclusion they looked at was in cardiac medicine. And what they found was, working with a group of about 15 other doctors, in 2015, they discovered, going through data, that as Black and Latinx patients were being admitted to Brigham, they were, for cardiac conditions, serious cardiac conditions, many of them were being seen in general practice. More of the white patients, considerably more white patients, according to the data, were being seen in cardiac medicine, a specific area of the hospital. The result was that you had much worse outcomes for people of color than you had for white patients. And they saw this as a form of institutionalized racism and decided to do something about it, based on their core philosophy, which is equity. And if you wanted any better example of how to achieve equity, it had to occur in an area where the majority of serious cases were related to cardiac unrest.
And I don't think, I mean, you'd have to be living under a rock for the past 400 years to not know that this was happening, right? And especially, we've looked at studies of women who have been treated differently than men have been treated. Medical science has been working hard to be fair and equitable in treating their patients. So what's the point this neo-Nazi group is trying to make? How is this killing whites? How is spreading health care to everyone in an equitable fashion, how is that taking away from treating white people? I think
let's address this in two ways, Sue. I think the first way we should address this is they don't believe this. And if they do believe it, it's irrelevant. Because what they see is an issue that they could take advantage of, glob onto. It's something that Donald Trump said at a rally several weeks ago. And Donald Trump got his ideas from the right-wing media sphere, where this idea of by creating equity in medicine, you're somehow taking away from white patients, has become, like a lot of things in the Trump sphere, a lie. These falsehoods have taken on a life on their own. Mythology that politicians see advantage in. It's pretty much like the mythology that's been of critical race theory. What it's become in the minds of many reactionaries, many on the far right, and the far right, of course, has become the normal. It's the mainstreaming of extremism, is how I like to put it. So they can't be taken seriously. Andrea Cabral on Boston Public Radio put it succinctly. This is these individuals trying to take advantage of a situation, of a mainstream talking point within the reactionary, conservative, right-wing media sphere that they see as advantage.
I probably, like you, I feel like I don't want to give this group too much attention because they don't seem like a big group. They're obviously looking for something to hook onto, but I do want to talk about them a little bit. One of the things that we've seen evolving over the decade is the way that these neo-Nazi groups have been presenting themselves. Mm-hmm. It's like they've taken a page out of almost every group that has worked to get acceptance, putting on khakis, not using a swastika, really presenting themselves as this normcore, normal group of guys who just happen to be out protesting in front of a hospital on a winter day. Can you tell me a little bit about who they are and where they come from?
So you hit the nail on the head. If you look at neo-Nazi groups around the country, like the Patriot Front, they have basically taken a page from nationalist socialist movements in the United States. Not the Aryan Brotherhood so much, that's a group inside prisons, but other groups, and they have basically decided, like David Duke, for example, with the Ku Klux Klan, to drop the hoods, and this way they're dropping the swastikas, you're right, substituting it for other symbols. And the person who started this group, called the Nationalist Social Club, might sound innocuous to some people. This is an individual named Chris Hood, who was from Worcester. 2019, they started this group, according to the Anti-Defamation League. He's been kicked out of everything, including other neo-Nazi groups. He was kicked out of a group called the Base for theft. And so he decided to found his own club. And they have largely been unsuccessful. They exist basically to pass out flyers and stickers and to protest in front of hospitals. And their hope is to grow. And this group has been around, again, since 2019. They have chapters throughout New England, relatively small, and they have chapters apparently in France and Kentucky and a number of other places. And so what they represent might be a small organization, but the Anti-Defamation League says they've experienced some growth during the Trump period, during this period of in the post-Trump period. But they started to experience growth, like a lot of neo-Nazi groups during the Trump period, where you had groups grew from 99 avowed neo-Nazi organizations to 121 in the United States, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. And this is just one of them.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the doctors. I mean, we're in a world right now where doing a regular job, like being a teacher, working as in the election department in your hometown.
Librarian.
Working as a librarian, working as a kindergarten teacher, working as a doctor, has now suddenly put you in the public spotlight to be getting death threats, to be fearful that you'll be fired for just doing what your mission is to do. How are these doctors reacting to this attention that they're getting?
I've spoken to quite a few doctors, in addition to the ones featured in the article. Many of them, of course, are concerned about their own safety, but they are not so concerned that they're going to refocus their attention on something else. Those who are focused on equity will continue to focus on equity. Dr. Morris, for example, who leads a large equity network, medical equity network in the United States, she, looking at her social media feed today, hundreds of new followers. Mm-hmm. And hundreds of people saying we will not be deterred by the actions of neo-Nazis and other extremists and their supporters within conservative circles. These neo-Nazis are gaining fuel from the politics of white grievance. They're taking advantage of that. And these doctors have basically said, yes, we are concerned about our safety, because violence, we saw with January 6th, has been normalized. You have Republican politicians who will not speak out against these things. You have neo-Nazis in Florida right now. You know about these incidents, where the governor of Florida has refused to condemn neo-Nazis, decided to condemn the Democratic Party that's condemning neo-Nazis rather than to condemn neo-Nazis. That's where we are right now.
You know, if we had said to each other 10 years ago, you know, in 2022, there's going to be a lot of attention on healthcare. Right?
Right.
There's going to be a lot of, you know, interest about it. We're going to be pushing to get people get a new medicine, and you know, we would probably have had a more optimistic viewpoint as what would be happening. But to that point, COVID has unfortunately shown us in real strict data terms the inequities that exist in our healthcare system and the challenges that people who should know otherwise in terms of getting vaccinated and their resistance to get vaccinated. As we get through this, do you think this is an opportunity for Americans to really see what the lay of the land is, how things are broken, and hopefully we'll come out of this with a more optimistic plan for both, you know, equity and for our medical community?
It's a great question. I think if you think about it, Sue, if there are individuals who refuse to accept facts, objective reality, who are being flooded with disinformation, you will win over some of those people. But a lot of people who are basically committed to a particular point of view, a frame of reference, are no longer persuaded by this thing we call facts. Facts be damned in the context of even medicine, in science, things that are observable, empirically determined, so on and so forth. So as far as optimism, it's not for me to say. I can say that it seems problematic that we will have a lot of people basically transitioning to the side, if you will, of objective reality, when in fact they're invested in disinformation. And I would say, just finally, if you will, that you're right, the COVID situation has divided people, but it's actually people who have divided themselves between facts and disinformation.
You know, I was struck by this group. Obviously, anytime there's neo-Nazis protesting, I'm struck by them. But at the same time, as we look at the public health plan to try and get more people vaccinated, the group that continues to be hardest to reach, according to many surveys, is white men who live in red states who are likely to have voted for Donald Trump. And this is the group that looks like was out there protesting that, you know, whites weren't getting health care treatment. You know, the irony and tragedy of that message by that group, when they could be preaching to their other neo-Nazi brothers and sisters to get vaccinated, and that would probably do more to help their cause than this. Not that I want to help them, but my point being.
Your point makes sense. Though I would say, in terms of the demographics of who is attracted to this movement, it's actually across states, blue and red, and many folks who live in areas that are, in their view, being contested, that are where they're being replaced. In other words, urban areas and blue areas. That's where you find some of the greatest growth among neo-Nazis and conservative forces to the far right. And in terms of like whether or not they will, again, see themselves under siege, well, you have talk show hosts, as you know, conservative talk show hosts who've died by several dozen, I understand. Mm-hmm. Conservative talk show hosts, mega church leaders, evangelicals, they've died and they haven't had that come to Jesus moment when it comes to COVID. They have not accepted that it is something that's killing them. And so I'm not sure how much the objective debilitation, the right in your face type of problem is actually going to persuade these individuals.
All right, Phillip Martin, I appreciate your work covering this important topic, and as always, we'll look to you for the latest as we follow it. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you very much.
Great to see you.
Much appreciated.
After nearly a decade of leading CNN as a network president, Jeff Zucker abruptly resigned yesterday. He admitted he'd failed to disclose a relationship with a senior network executive at the company, which was uncovered during an ongoing investigation into Chris Cuomo's CNN tenure. It was 2 months ago that Zucker fired the primetime anchor for his role in the then New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's handling of his harassment scandal. And in a memo to employees yesterday, Zucker wrote that as part of the Cuomo investigation, quote, I was asked about a consensual relationship with my closest colleague. I acknowledged the relationship evolved in recent years. I was required to disclose it when it began, but I didn't. I was wrong. And now, the fallout. Joining me to discuss are Justin Baragona, media reporter with the Daily Beast, and Joanna Weiss, editor of Experience magazine. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
You know, Justin, I just went through my other job training where I went through a multiple question thing about making sure that I disclose any relationships that I had that might be improper to HR. Did Zucker not need to go through that? Is he exempt from those? What's the latest?
Well, I mean, obviously, what we've heard is that this relationship was an open secret within CNN as it was. So they're trying to say, or at least Zucker's trying to say, that he did not disclose it. He forgot to disclose it. Alison Gullist is saying that, the relationship changed during COVID and they just, forgot to let corporate know. But from everybody's reporting, and even all the way back to Katie Couric's book, I mean, they'd been together for a while, but they're now both divorced, consensual relationship, but it's within the workplace. You could see favoritism within, so yes, the improper nature of it without disclosing it became a problem. Zucker wanted to be able to stay on for a little bit longer. The board said, no, you either are going to resign or we're going to fire you. Your choice.
Joanna, how does this happen? This is the part that really makes my head explode. If I were in charge of a company and I was doing something that was, maybe I was just taking home company supplies on a regular basis, right? And we definitely weren't supposed to do that. That was a big deal. And I was then investigating an employee who may have been taking home company supplies without permission. I probably would make sure my house was in order, especially if this was a consensual relationship that everyone knew about. There doesn't seem to be anything untoward about it except for between their marriages, and that's their business. Why does this happen?
Yeah, in media and in politics, it's hypocrisy that winds up getting people in the end, isn't it? It's not necessarily the act. I mean, I agree. This was an act of questionable judgment at best. On a scale of transgressions, this was not sort of Roger Ailes, but something on a different end of that spectrum. That said, even if it was an open secret, you're right. It was, and I think it often has to do with hubris, and it often has to do with a feeling that you're so important, you've gotten away with something for so long, everybody knows about it anyway, it doesn't matter, the rules don't apply to you. It's been interesting to read the coverage and see that a lot of certainly the top talent at CNN was really shocked by this and is standing by Zucker and was very upset, and was really questioning Jason Kilar, if I'm pronouncing that right, and really trying to pin down what's the real story here. Is this really the reason for firing, or is there much more to the story?
Yeah, and Justin, they seem to be presenting it too in the light that this is Cuomo's fault. Because Cuomo is the one that ultimately is getting in trouble, and perhaps in his work at trying to get a better settlement from CNN, this was unearthed as if it needed to be unearthed because, as you said, I read it in Katie Couric's book, and it intrigued me, and I didn't even know what was going on. Is there an effort here to try and paint somebody as the bad guy?
Well, interesting that you say that about the bad guy, because in a DC meeting last night with the top CNN stars and staffers and Kilar, Jake Tapper himself said, how are we letting the bad guy win here? Referencing Chris Cuomo. It's a multi-pronged thing here. Among at least the on-air talent in much of the top brass over at CNN, Jeff Zucker was a beloved figure. Him going in this way, in this matter, and seemingly within the context of the Chris Cuomo pending lawsuit, right now negotiations over his unpaid salary, They're looking at it as, this seems unfair. Whether we should see that as being fair or not. They are seeing that as being an unfair way that he's being let go.
Joanna, we've worked in the media business a long time, and it's not surprising to me that someone was acting in a way that was contrary to what the rules and the company handbook said. But at the same time, it is surprising to me in a way how quickly things are changing. I don't think that if you had said to me 5 years ago, a CNN top executive would be out for a consensual relationship he was having with someone, I would have believed that that was actually possible to happen.
Well, and this is also, this is, I think, part of the reason why some people within CNN and outside of CNN are questioning, was this kind of a, I don't know, fig leaf's the right metaphor, but, if the larger reason for firing him had more to do with tensions between Jeff Zucker and Kalar, they, by all reports, did not have the greatest relationship. There's a lot moving and changing at CNN right now. It's a very interesting and tense time to have a big change of leadership. CNN's just weeks away from launching this streaming platform that they've put a lot of energy, money, attention, and kind of future hopes on. And so to kind of to shove out the top leader at this moment is a really interesting and kind of questionable business move.
Justin, where is CNN right now? Obviously the streaming service is important. I had a friend who was watching the morning show on HBO and said, that seems so far-fetched. I went, no, it looks exactly like, it's almost like a documentary in many ways. And CNN is kind of proving that point. They've had a very, very rocky, how long, past 5 years? And is this an opportunity for them to set the sails and get things on a more, predictable way?
Right now, it's very unpredictable right now for where they're going to go. As Joanna was saying, they're getting ready to launch their big digital streaming platform, which, right now, there's a glut of streaming out there. And currently, CNN has seen their ratings plummet over the past year. So it's questionable to think that the streaming option of CNN programming is going to be something that people are going to desire a lot. At the same time, Zucker going away, like you said, there's been a rocky past few years, but just a year or so ago, they had ratings highs and then they plummeted post-Trump. Now without Zucker, you're going to have a lot of CNN personalities that are kind of worried about where their place is at the network. Who's going to be the new leadership? What kind of direction are they going to want to go in? How do I look in this whole new frame of what the new CNN is going to be? Zucker was there for about 10 years, had a very specific vision in mind. Now they're going to have a whole different vision. And am I going to fit into that vision?
Joanna, I want to talk a little bit about the way that we talk about the ratings, and it's very clear that the ratings are very much associated to the Trump era, that people who maybe on an average would not tune into a CNN or an MSNBC were tuning in because they were looking for news and they were looking for opinion. We are about to enter a midterm election year. We're in an election year, a midterm election year. And then soon we're going to start the presidential campaign all over again. Former President Trump emerging and being out more and more. And certainly Zucker got a lot of criticism for highlighting Trump during his campaign. And full disclosure, I'm an employee of NBC Comcast, and when Zucker was at NBC, that's where The Apprentice was. What do you forecast of how these networks, these cable networks, excluding Fox, are going to be covering the midterms and the presidential election? And do you think they're going to be banging the drum in order to get the ratings that they had before?
Well, to take a step back, part of the issue, and there's a lot of controversy around all of the decisions that Jeff Zucker and others made that boosted ratings during that time period, going back from, or extending from Trump to Cuomo. But really, I think it goes back further. Honestly, the original sin of all of these 24-hour cable networks is this idea that you have 24 hours to fill on the cheap, which leads to these panel discussions that are of questionable value and leads to the need for entertainment taking the place of news. And I remember very clearly during the 2016 election campaign that, you know, they'd be doing anyone would be doing a talk show, and Donald Trump would call in from it. Well, we have Donald Trump on the phone from his plane. We have Donald Trump on the phone from a restaurant. We have Donald Trump on the phone from a boat. And anytime he wanted any kind of news coverage, he got what was essentially free advertising by virtue of him being an entertaining figure. And, you know, CNN was not the only network to do that, but CNN was a prime platform for Donald Trump to grow his political brand. And there's a lot of question now about what use are these panels? How do these networks that have now become even more partisan and more committed to being pro-Trump or anti-Trump, depending on the network, how do they handle politics in a way that is fair and journalistic when they have set up this apparatus that really does the opposite?
And on the other side of that, Justin, it's been a grim few years, and the Me Too movement, that was also grim, and many people were ousted for good reason in media. But because of the consensual nature of this, I think there's somewhat of a glee in the industry around being able to cover something that's a little gossipy, although these are people's real lives. I want to make sure I'm clear about that, with a real impact to their families. But I am sensing that there's an old-style New York tabloid excitement about covering Zucker's outing from CNN.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, part of it is going to be, they see it as just desserts for Jeff Zucker. Especially if you're talking about right-wing media, it's a way to really just hammer away at him. Say, oh, they put themselves up on this pedestal, but look what was happening here. This was all under the rug the whole time, even though, as we've discussed, it was a consensual relationship, but it was undisclosed. And jumping all aboard it, if you were to look at the New York Daily News, the New York Post, the headlines, they just feel like they write themselves. Fox News they mentioned Jeff Zucker 170 times on their air yesterday after this occurred.
Well, I'm not sure he's going to
they haven't slowed it down either.
I'm not sure he's the ratings meet that they're looking for over there, but I appreciate both of you for this intelligent panel conversation. Justin Baragona, Joanna Weiss, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
That's it for tonight, but come back tomorrow for Talking Politics. Adam Riley and his panel will take up some new candidates across the state, a call to make the governor's office more transparent, and a push to consider reparations in Boston. Plus, Maura Healey's strategy begs the question, is there room for moderation in the Democratic Party? That and more tomorrow at 7. Thanks for watching. Good night.